the early years of the internet, a lot of freeware was being passed around. Most of these programs were just passing novelties, often just presenting an idea or concept without fleshing it out into a full-fledged game. Some of these free passion projects have risen to the top, however, either living strongly in the memories of the people that had played them, or in some cases they've gotten remakes and commercial publications. Compared to the likes of La Mulana and Cave Story, it's not hard to see why Lyle and Cube Sector didn't get the remake treatment. It's a game about a guy trying to reclaim his stolen cat, and he apparently just happens to live in a Metroidvania neighborhood where everything wants to kill him. It lacks the kind of depth and complexity that those more secret-filled and more social media-friendly competitors had. From a pure gameplay perspective, however, Lyle and Cube Sector offers something wholly unique, and as a Metroidvania, it's a contender for some of the best level design overall. Its narrative and style might not have that powerful hold that those other well-known mid-2000s freeware games had, but it does have a ton of heart in the places that matter. The premise of Lyle and Cube Sector is that all of your actions are centered around lifting up and throwing blocks. While in true Metroidvania fashion, you begin with little power to do anything, your first ability is lifting those cubes. From there, paying attention to what's available in the environment becomes your immediate objective. Although calling this process puzzle platforming is a bit of a stretch. At any time, you're only given enough options to get you through a single room. You can't carry blocks into other rooms anyway, so solutions are usually pretty obvious. The trickier part with the block interactions is dealing with the hordes of bugs and bizarre creatures that want to deplete your health points. Lyle has several options for throwing blocks once he has one in hand. Throwing while running gives the block more horizontal distance. Holding the down button and then throwing causes the block to arc much closer to Lyle, letting him hit enemies right next to him or underneath him. You can also throw blocks straight up into the air, but beware, if a block ever makes its way back to Lyle, it can damage him instead. I was a victim of many self-kills almost immediately after retrieving the block lifting power, and it took me quite a while to get used to the physics. The way Lyle throws blocks is always consistent, however, so while lobbing cubes didn't allow me to transfer any skills I had acquired from playing other Metroidvania games, I was able to master the technique by the end of the game. In fact, if you ever wanted to know what it's like to be a kid again playing video games for the first time, a game like Lyle and Cube Sector that does things wholly different from anything else is a great way to test your mettle. Every enemy follows an exact and strict pattern, including the bosses, although not every enemy has movement that is easy to predict. It's all slow enough that you can react to less consistent patterns easily, assuming you've honed your aim enough that your reaction can accomplish something. Some enemies take more practice than others, but ultimately even the final boss can be manipulated so that they are playing your game instead of the other way around. The enemies and the three bosses are where Lyle and Cube Sector's fantastic creativity really shines, with one boss in particular being so out of left field that it made me laugh out loud. Ideas are introduced nicely as the game unfolds, so you intuitively know what to do when a boss suddenly changes their pattern, although knowing what to do and executing that action are two completely different things. Enemy encounters are creative overall and really satisfying to take down. Where Lyle and Cube Sector might get a little controversial is how it handles checkpoints. If you die, you always start back at your house at the beginning of the game. Calling this a single checkpoint isn't exactly true, however, and the game is way more forgiving than it would initially seem. You keep everything that you've collected before dying, whether that be one of the game's 20 collectibles or any of the critical power-ups. You also keep any room that you've explored on your map, so suicide exploration is totally a thing you can do. Most importantly though, Lyle's neighborhood has 3 teleporters that link back to a central hub right next to your house, so collect any of these and you've effectively unlocked the game's 3 checkpoints permanently. The setup gives Lyle's world a sense of place, something important for any Metroidvania game, and the teleporters manage to keep the unnecessary repetition to a minimum, at least as it relates to the exploration aspect. My main criticism for this death mechanic is that as soon as you collect more than the starting number of max health points, you only ever respawn with that initial value. This means that you'll have to grind out some enemies to get back to your new maximum every time you die. There's an ideal grinding spot located right next to a teleporter, but as convenient as that is, choosing to patch yourself up before tackling a challenging section of the map can get a little tedious to do every time you fail. Thankfully, boxes that provide health items will respawn every time you leave a screen, so sometimes merciful placement of said boxes can mitigate this issue. A better design might have been just to give the player a full heal at these points, but that criticism starts to tread into nitpicking. Eventually you get powers that will crush the difficulty of any given section of the game, but until you get those powers, Lyle plays out more similarly to an unforgiving Mega Man level played with 0 lives once you figure out where to go. On the second and final boss, you must survive a long gauntlet of enemies leading up to them before you even have a chance to fight them. With the second boss in particular, if you don't play that gauntlet perfectly, you're going to have that many fewer HP to use while learning the boss's pattern. I think calling this unfair would be wrong, since the game gives you every tool you'll need to do the task unharmed, and that task is actually pretty easy to do with some practice. Until you get that experience though, Lyle and Cube Sector can be extremely punishing, and I think most players are going to be wishing that there were just 1 or 2 more checkpoints available in those more brutal sections. Personally, I'd add just 1 more teleporter in the upper right section of the map, maybe put it behind a secret passage to award explorers, and I think the map would be perfect for my own tastes. As is, I think this punishing design is going to be the biggest turnoff for most players. Push past the most difficult parts though, and you'll get to enjoy a very well designed Metroidvania world, which for me is the biggest highlight of the game. Everything loops around back into itself with 2 or more ways to get just about anywhere. While the most critical paths have one singular optimal route, it's up to you to discover what that is, and given the single checkpoint rule, you have every incentive to do so. You're also rewarded for checking everywhere. For instance, you can upgrade your health a whopping 10 times by finding blue orbs, which of course can make the more difficult parts of the game much easier. There are also pink orbs that can be given to a vending machine that spits out more power increases. For the endgame, only 3 of the 10 pink orbs are actually optional, but getting these pink orbs early on will reduce the overall difficulty, which isn't something I did in my playthrough, so I was playing on hard mode without even knowing it. I don't always 100% every Metroidvania that I play, but collecting every secret in Lyle and Cube Sector was a delight, although it also helps that the game isn't particularly huge. Using a generous estimate contingent on how long it takes you to get good, Lyle and Cube Sector runs only about 5 hours long, and that includes the time it takes to get any of the optional collectibles. However, it's one of those games where the experience is compact and concentrated. Every single moment is pure ingenious design, with no fat or fluff to be found. Its old school style of punishing the player for their mistakes is probably going to be a turnoff for wider audiences, but compared to the likes of the original Metroid or other NES favorites like Blaster Master, Lyle and Cube Sector is actually pretty fair and forgiving. Throwing blocks to defeat your enemies is weird and maybe initially awkward, but mastering that unique focus is in my opinion a great part of the appeal. The hardest part about playing it today is getting it to run on a modern PC. I personally had to run it in Windows XP compatibility mode to eliminate issues. Other than that though, it's still completely free, and wholly worth checking out, and not just because it's a time capsule for a nostalgic era of gaming. Lyle and Cube Sector isn't epic by any measure, but it is a great game. I give Lyle and Cube Sector's combat a 4 out of 5. Enemy patterns are discernible, making for a great hard but fair experience, although I suspect many will find the block throwing a bit hard to get used to. I give the platforming a 3 out of 5. Precise platforming isn't heavily challenged in this game, but the abilities you gain do make it interesting. Exploration gets a 4.5 out of 5. Lyle has a masterfully designed world, with secrets hidden in intriguing places. Although some items might be a tiny bit obtuse, it's all presented well enough that you could do it without a guide. My puzzle score for Lyle and Cube Sector is a 3 out of 5. There are only 1 or 2 secrets that involve what could be called puzzles, but they are fun puzzles. I give the story a 3 out of 5. The entire story is given to you in the game's title screen, but who doesn't want to save a stolen cat? The graphics get a 4 out of 5. The old school aesthetic is timeless, and there are even some good CRT filters available for that extra nostalgia. The music gets a 4 out of 5. The music is incredibly catchy, right from the start. Replayability gets a 2 out of 5. There really aren't any options to give multiple playthroughs any sort of newness to it, unless you get into speedrunning. My final score for Lyle and Cube Sector is a 4 out of 5. As always, this score is not a mathematical product of the other scores. Lyle and Cube Sector's unforgiving lack of checkpoints and weird block throwing mechanics may make learning this game a chore for some, but it is fair and satisfying to complete, with some spectacular level design. Thank you for watching our review. Make sure you check the description below for the link where you can download Lyle and Cube Sector for free. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also visit our website where we have over 150 written reviews for Metroidvania-related games. Join us every Saturday morning for the Metroidvania review stream on Twitch, or every Wednesday evening for the Our Metroidvania podcast. You can find links for all those things and more below. I would like to especially thank our Patreons for this review. Once a month, one of our written reviews is a Patreon pick, and Lyle and Cube Sector was one of those Patreon reviews. It is because of the support from our Patreons and our fans that we can keep going. You all have my sincere thanks from the bottom of my heart. And I'd like to thank all those who are watching, and I hope you have an especially adventurous day.